do you have an opinion within a reasonable degree of medical and scientific probability as to whether or not that exposure that I described in the hypothetical would be a substantial contributing cause of Pablo Gonzalez's diffuse malignant mesothelioma of the pleural?
I do.
What's your opinion?
I think it's unlikely that it would not.
And why do you say that?
Because of what I said earlier about the release of fibers from gaskets that the studies indicate is below the permissible exposure limit. And in my opinion, those levels of chrysotile exposure don't cause or contribute to mesothelioma.
And what's that opinion based on?
It's based on review of the literature, my experience, studies that I've done with fiber analysis, epidemiological studies, studies which have looked at the various fiber types, shown striking differences in the fiber potencies of the different fiber types. It's all that information together.
All right, let's move to a slightly different subject now. Dr. Roggli, what does idiopathic mean in the medical profession?
Idiopathic means it's a disease for which we do not know what the cause is.
Okay. Now, do we know the cause of mesothelioma generally, in the sense that asbestos can cause mesothelioma?
Yes.
Does it follow then that every case of mesothelioma is caused by exposure to asbestos?
No.
Why not?
Well, it's recognized. My understanding of epidemiology is somewhere between 80 and 90% of mesotheliomas are asbestos related, and that fits exactly with what our fiber analysis study showed. I think up to about 10 years ago, we found that about 11% of our cases had asbestos levels not different from what you'd expect in the lungs of myself or yourself, and that in more recent years, it's to a point it's about 16%. So 84 to 89% in our own experience of mesotheliomas appear to be asbestos related, and that fits with what my reading of the epidemiology shows.
And just by, I guess, simple arithmetic, if 84 to 89% are asbestos related, what does that tell you about the other 11 to 16%?
The other 11 to 16% are due to other causes, most of which are unknown, therefore idiopathic.
And is that what you mean? Well, unknown means idiopathic in medical parlance?
Yes, in terms of causation.
Okay. Now, is mesothelioma the only, let's talk about diseases first. Is mesothelioma the only disease known to medicine for which there may be cases where you can't ascribe the cause?
No, for the vast majority of cancers, we don't know what the cause is. The vast majority of breast cancers, you can't pinpoint a specific cause. The vast majority of prostate cancers in men. The vast majority of colon cancers, you can't say this is what did it. There are some cancers that we know what the cause for most of them are. Mesothelioma is one, and lung cancer is another.
And of course, with lung cancer, it's mostly caused by cigarette smoking?
Yes.
Are there lung cancers that arise in people who've never smoked a day in their life?
There are.
Are there lung cancers that arise in people who have never been around, lived in a home with people who smoke?
There are.
Well, does this apply to non-malignant diseases? For example, pulmonary fibrosis. Is that a disease you're familiar with?
Yes.
And just very quickly, what is pulmonary fibrosis?
It just means a scar that's occurring inside the lung, and if it's involving both lungs in a sort of a uniform fashion, then the lung, which has to expand and contract to breathe, if you have the scar tissue, it makes the lung stiff and interferes with normal breathing.
Can asbestos exposure cause pulmonary fibrosis?
It's one of the causes, yes.
And as a pathologist, if you follow the guidelines that pathologists follow, and you believe that a case of pulmonary fibrosis is caused by asbestos exposure, what do you call that?
Asbestosis.
If as a pathologist you look at a case of pulmonary fibrosis and you look at the lung tissue and you say, I don't know what caused this pulmonary fibrosis, what do you call that?
We call it idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis.
And is that an actual term that appears in medical texts?
It is.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
It is.